Hey card making friends, welcome back. It's Sandy here, and today I'm playing mixed media with the Watercolor Flowers stamp and die set, and I have gold embossed all of the images, including the leaves, onto watercolor paper, and I have used gold embossing powder. I used the detailed embossing powder from Simon Says Stamps because the lines are quite thin, and I wanted a really pretty fine line for these. Today I'm going to be watercoloring with my Karen markers. They come in this awesome box, and it's got a funny lid that opens up, and then you have all these pretty colors inside. Each pen is full of watercolor ink, I guess we'd call it, paint. I don't know what you'd call it. And it has a paintbrush tip on the end of it, so you can watercolor right from the pen, which I'm going to be doing today. So we have a sample, and I'm going to show you basically the technique. You're going to scribble on some of the green, and then you're going to scribble on a little bit of the blue or whatever color you happen to be working with. Then you're going to take some water and you're going to blend it. So you can blend it with a paintbrush. For this technique, I prefer to spritz it. I'm using 4 pens for today. I have a magenta red, the number is 170. The yellow is gold for 283. The blue is turquoise, 654, and the green is grass, 253. Again, a spritzer. I have a paintbrush in case I need it, and I have a little container of water. And again, I'm working on watercolor paper, and I also have a large paintbrush, and I'm going to wet each one of these pieces before I start adding any color. I find that it blends a lot easier that way, and I just figured out that this paintbrush has a whole bunch of blue paint on it. Excuse me while I wipe that off. We'll change paintbrushes. I know the other one's clean. Okay, so re-wetting, coming in with some clean water. Okay, I'm going to get both of these wet. You can work on 2 or 3 at a time. And basically, you're just going to scribble. I mean, this is the messiest watercolor you ever want to try. And it's the easiest. You need no experience whatsoever to do this. Okay, so I'm adding some of that magenta red to the outside edges. And then I'm going to bring in my spritzer and I'm going to spritz. And that's really all there is to it. As it dries, obviously it's going to get a little bit lighter. There's also some white spots that you can touch up with a paintbrush if you want to. But you can go back in with your pens and you can add more ink, which we will do as we're working along. Okay, so I'm re-wetting the second one, and I'm just going to repeat. And I'm doing this in real time. The rest of them I'll speed up in just a second here. And then secondly, add the pink or the red around the outside. And of course, these two colors, when you blend them together, if you look on the color wheel, they make kind of a pinky orange, depending on how much red or how much yellow you use. And look at it run. The fun of adding more ink to wet paper. So cool. And it's starting to dry on this other one, so I'm adding a little bit more color to it. And some of it didn't run, so I am going to spritz it just a tiny little bit in a minute. I'm going to let it sit and see what it does. Okay, so I'm wetting the next 2 and starting to add the color. And I'm going to speed this up. Looks like I'm coloring very fast because we have all of these flowers to go through. But basically the technique is exactly the same for all of the flowers. And as you get in there and as you get comfortable, you can start doing 3 at a time if you like. And then just keep an eye on the other ones that are starting to dry. Make sure that you don't need to add a little bit more color, or maybe you need to use a paper towel and wick up a puddle. You know, you don't want too many puddles. You just want this wet so that the ink moves around. So adding a little bit more red to that one. So depending on whether you like your flowers very pale, if you do, then just let them dry after the first application. If you like more deep colors, then you go back in like I'm doing and start adding more ink. And if you really hate it, or if it runs or you get too much, wet it and stick it a paper towel over top of it, and it will wick it all up and you can start over again. It's a very forgiving technique. So here we're getting brave. We're doing 3 at a time. And I'm not worrying about staying inside the lines either. Like, I really don't care. The embossing actually kind of serves to hold everything in. But if you do get too much water in it, it will seep over the edges and just go crazy. But we're playing with the same color on all the flowers, so it really doesn't matter if they run into each other. Okay, and the final two big ones, I have a finger on the middle of the paper because it was starting to warp a little bit and I wanted it to stay flat so that all my ink doesn't run. Or you could tape it to a piece of cardboard. And I'm working on top of my glass mat because it's really, really easy to clean it up. And I'm just noticing that my yellow is starting to dry on the other flowers, so I snuck back over there and added some more yellow. Adding in a few different places. You want to try and do it before it dries, but if it does dry, you can still add it and then spritz it again and it will activate it again. So again, very forgiving. Okay, these last two are kind of dull to my liking anyway, so I'm coming in and adding a whole bunch more ink and giving it a little bit of a spritz to get everything running, and I'm going to set that aside and we're going to work on the leaves. So the leaves are the two, the blue and the green, and we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to wet, and then we're going to load a tiny little bit of the blue, and then we're going to come back and load more of the green, because I want most of my leaf green, but I want the highlight of the blue. And then come with a spritzer and give it a spritz. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next row, and you can do a whole row at a time. They're not going to dry that fast. Okay, adding all the green this time, and then just a touch of the blue down at the bottom, and spritzing. Isn't this easy? Wait till they dry and you see how pretty they are. They're just quite amazing. And I'm pulling some of the water out there. In a minute I'll pick it up with my paper towel. We need to wick some of that water up. Okay, and the final row, I had no idea how many leaves I was going to do, so I did 3 rows. And again, they're all gold embossed. I think I used most of them. I think I only had 2 or 3 left over because I do end up making 3 cards. I started with, maybe I'll make 1 or 2. I had enough to do 3. Okay, so coming back in and adding a bit more color. And I'm going to wick up some of these puddles because we do want this to dry. And I am going to take a heat tool to it. If I wasn't doing the video, I would probably let it dry overnight. Okay, and this time I'm going to reverse the flowers. I'm going to put the red in the middle, and I'm going to put the yellow around the outside. Just for a change. And it looks nice on the cards when all the flowers aren't the same. They're the same color, so they kind of look the same, but they've got different textures to them. Okay, just adding a bunch of color back in and then spritzing. Deepening the color and then coming back in with the yellow. Okay, and the green is starting to dry, so it's fading out a little bit. So going back in with some green and some blue, darkening my colors. That little one didn't run, so I just hit it with the paintbrush. Okay, so now I'm going to get my heat tool and I am going to start drying these. Some of them have fairly large puddles, so try and wick up the puddles as much as you can without taking all of the color out of the inside of the petals. Work your way around the outside of the embossing. And this has been sitting for a while, so you can really see where the puddles are on this one. Zip around and clean them up. Okay, there they are, all dry. They turned out really cool. One of the reasons I like this technique is none of the flowers are the same, and they get a great color blend, anything from pink orange to really, really bright yellow. And the same thing with the leaves. None of the leaves are the same, but they're so pretty. And the water mixed with the ink has just blended beautifully.
Okay, and I'm going to use these, and I'm going to
cut these all out now. There is a coordinating set of dies for these, thank goodness. And here we are. Here's all the finished flowers. And as you can see, I also cut some glitter gold ones. I stole that idea from Anna.
What I'm going to do,
she did a card that similar to this one with many different colors, and she incorporated some gold leaves, and I thought it was just a fabulous idea. Okay, so I have some backgrounds. They're pre-made, but this one was done with Lindy's Magicals, and this was a hydrangea blue. And then these two were done with Distress Oxide ink sprays, ripe persimmon, spiced marmalade, and mustard seed. And I just sprayed them and let them dry. Nothing fancy. So we're going to zooey up the background a little bit on these. I am going to be using what am I using? The Shiny Diamond Stencil from Alex Siberia Designs. And I'm going to be working on top of my Waffle Flowers grip mat. I love this thing. Grip is what it does. So you get it out of the package, you peel off these protective covers. This is the 5.5 by the 8.5, which is a great size because you do need some of the grip to be showing around the outside of your card base so that your stencil sticks to it, which is the idea. You're supposed to be able to stick your paper and your stencil to it so it doesn't move, and then you have two hands to work on your project. This is watercolor paper, and it's been extremely wet, so it's not sticking to this very well. But when I put the stencil over top of it, because there's an overhang of the stencil, it does hold it in place for me. Okay, so the first one, I'm going to be using the Gina K Glitz Glitter Gel, and this is the iridescent color. And I'm going to use a knife to kind of selectively add a little bit. I'm not going to do the entire surface, because I've got some stamping that I want to do in some of the other places. So I'm just randomly going to pick 2 or 3 places to add a little bit of this. And this doesn't have too much moisture in it. Some of them do, and they will pick up the color from underneath. They'll activate the color underneath. This one didn't. You will notice when we do the other two that were sprayed with the Distressed Oxide sprays, they do pick up the color, and it's really cool that all the diamonds turn yellow. It's very cool. Okay, so we're just cleaning the brush off. We're going to put the lid back on. I have some press and seal over top of that just to stop the moisture or any air getting in to dry that out. I've actually had that one for about 1.5 years. So Gina K's products does a good job. It doesn't dry out like some of the other ones. I had to throw out a whole bin of one of the other ones last week. All dry. Okay, moving on to the second one. Again, adding the Shiny Diamond Stencil, pushing it down so that it holds to my grip mat. This time I'm going to be using the Dreamweaver's embossing paste. This is just plain white paste. And as I said, it's going to pick up the color of what's underneath of it. So I'm putting some at the top where it's quite yellow, mustard, and then some kind of over on the left, in the middle, and then down on the right-hand side. Okay. Looks beautiful in white, but it doesn't stay that way. I was expecting that though, so no worries. And again, the other one. I'm basically doing the same thing, but I'm doing it on the opposite sides and a little bit more in the middle. Okay, and so you want to take this stencil and this knife and you want to clean these right away. You don't want to let this product dry on your stencil or your knife. And because I'm working on my glass mat, I just clean up my glass mat with a wet squeegee. It's that easy. Okay, my card fronts are dry. See me stick my finger in it to see? I'm terrible at doing that. The iridescent one is really pretty on the blue, and then the white ended up picking up some of the ink from underneath of it, the Distressed Oxides, and it turned a pretty yellow. So I'm going to do some tone-on-tone stamping with the outline stamps, the same ones that we used for the watercoloring. And I'm using Simon Says stamps, and this is their Positively Saturated ink. I've got Ocean and Citron. And I'm going to just randomly stamp 2 of the flowers. I'm just checking the ink to make sure I like the color. I've got 2, one small and one kind of medium flower, and wherever I don't have any of the embossing paste on the background, I am stamping the flower image. I like to call this background noise. It's just a little something going on in the background, but it's not going to overtake the art piece on the front of your card. It's just something to look at and adds a layer of interest. Okay, they turn out really pretty. The blue one gets pretty much covered with flowers, but you can still see a little bit in the background. Okay, so doing the second one here, sneaking in every little stamping surface I can get. Okay, that one's done. You can sort of see it. It's pretty. Okay, and then we're going to switch over and we're going to do the blue one. So I'm just cleaning my stamps off with my chamois. You get the chamois at Walmart if you're asking. They're in where you get the car washing stuff. They work great for cleaning stamps. I've had this one for probably 10 years. Okay, cleaning off my work surface, and we're switching over to the blue and just, again, checking the color and doing the same thing. Randomly stamping the flowers wherever there's an empty spot. And I go back and forth between the large and the small, and I also turn the stamp so all the stamped images are not facing the same way. Okay, now it's time to audition where I want all the flowers. I did 3 backgrounds just in case I had enough flowers to do them, and turns out I did, depending on what I was going to do with them. So I'm doing the one on the left is going to have just 1 flower and some leaves and a large sentiment in the top right, and then the middle one is going to have flowers across the top, and then I've got a long sentiment to go there. And then the third one, I'm playing with my inner Yana, because I kind of copy one of her cards where she takes all these pretty flowers and she just covers the entire front of a card. It's so pretty. Okay, so I'm just adding my leaves in where I think I want them. And you can fuss around with this for hours. I kind of had an idea once I figured out how many flowers I had. And so I'm just kind of deciding what size of flowers I want on this one. Make up your mind. Okay, so what I'm doing is I've got the 2 outside edges are the same flower, and then there's one a tiny little bit bigger in the middle. So this one I'm going to add a couple of the gold leaves to. So I'm just kind of piecing in where the green ones are going to go. And then I'm going to add a couple of the gold ones. My sentiment on this one's going to be gold as well. I know this ahead of time. So, and it's kind of holds everything together by adding those gold leaves in. Okay, here's my inner Yana. Let's take all of these flowers and put them on one card. And again, you got to kind of shuffle them around. You don't want all the same size flowers all in a row. You want them mixed in with the smaller ones, some of them going off the card, and some of the pieces that I cut off, I actually come back and fill in and piece with the little pieces that are cut off. Okay, so the big one's going in the middle. The funky one's going there. Small one up there. I'm going to put another small one down there, and then this guy. I like that. And then that one can hang right off the edge. Yep, liking that. Okay, so I'm going to piece all those together. And I'm going to attach them with foam squares. These are Simon Says Stamps foam squares, and I like to use them regularly. I usually cut them in half, especially when I'm playing with small things like the leaves. You only need to half a little piece on the end of the leaf. I don't bother gluing the piece that's going to get slid underneath the flower because it's going to stay in place anyway. So it just speeds up the put together process a little bit. Okay, so I'm pretty much finished that one. I like what I'm doing. Just got one little leaf there to do. Okay, card 1's done. I'm using my favorite scissors. These are from Spellbinders, and they are no stick. They are the most amazing scissors in the world. You need a pair. I use them for everything. Okay, and what I've done is I've cut those squares in half so that I'm extending my foam squares because I'm thrifty, and adding them to the back of the flowers that I'm sticking back down. And I always glue the flowers down first, and then I slide the leaves in underneath. And if you don't put too many dimensionals or little pieces of foam on the back of the flowers, you don't run into too much resistance when you're trying to tuck the leaves in. Right now I'm just trying to fiddle and see where I want that flower to go. Okay, so then the leaves, and you get the idea. The third one is basically the way it is. I'm going to do it off camera because you get the idea of what's going on. And I also add all the leaves to it, and then I come back and show it to you just to speed it up a little bit because I just noticed this video is getting kind of long. But we are making 3 cards, so hey, and a technique. So it's worthwhile, right? Okay, there we go. There's card number 2. And like I said, I am going to put this together off camera. Here we go. So what you want to do is flip this over, take some nice sharp long scissors and trim everything that's hanging over. And these are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so there's not going to be any white border when I attach them to the card bases. Okay, and then I'm going to take those pieces that I have cut off. I'm going to add some foam to the back, and I'm going to fill in a couple of my little bald spots. Okay, so you want to audition them and see which ones you want. That one I can afford to put that great big petal on that side. And again, you're just going to flip it over and trim off anything that's hanging out. There we go. As you know, I live by everything is better with splatter, so I have some Winston & Newton white. I am mixing some water in with it to get it runny enough to do some splatting. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. I also have my Agassitambi, and these are the gem colors. I'm going to get that gold nice and wet, and again, mix it up. Get it running enough to splat. I love that gold. Nicest gold out there. All right, splat box, because I've learned my lesson. My computer monitor still has gold splat all over it. I can't get it off. So you're going to splat with both colors, the white and the gold. The white is probably going to activate the paint underneath of it, and it might turn a kind of a shade of yellow, but the gold stays pretty solid because it's opaque, but they look beautiful anyway. The white really shows up on the blue card, the last one there. Okay, so adding the gold, and if you tap your finger, you get small splats. If you do the way I just did there, you get larger splats. Okay, final one. I haven't trimmed the leaves off of this one yet. You can see them hanging out. And I did add some gold leaves to this one too, just 3 or 4 of them. It helps to highlight the flower centers, which are also done in gold, which is why I decided to do the gold leaves. Okay, and lots of gold splatter on this one. Yes, and we have to set these aside and let them dry. Isn't it pretty? I love splatter. There's another one. They're looking good. Okay, it's time for sentiments, and I cut those off screen as well. I got lots of videos on how to do die cutting. You can check out my YouTube channel. I also added some bling, so I've got some gold sequins. Actually, they're gems. They're not sequins that I've added to the cards. And I've done the large smile on the middle one. I have done the hello on the blue one. And this new one on the left-hand card says you are loved. And that's one of the new dies for this month. Here's all my little gems. And I added some to each of the cards. And I'm just going to do this one for you. Picket fence, I buy them from Simon Says Stamps. There's a pile of them in there, and there's 4 or 5 different sizes, so I really like those. I'm using my Simon Says Stamp Place and Score embellishment wand. It is great for picking these guys up. And I'm also using my Barely Art glue because it's got that nice fine tip. And I was just cleaning off the wax tip on my embellishment wand. It had a little bit of glue on it, which makes the gems want to stick to it instead of the paper. But there, you just rip along and add those. And that's the final touch. So here is all 3 of my cards that I'm sharing with you today. Everything I've used is listed underneath the video in the links. Just click the More button and it will expand the comments. There's also a link over to my blog if you want the measurements and the cutting instructions for today's cards. And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. This is the Alex Siberia Designs YouTube channel, so you can subscribe and you can also ring the bell and you'll get notified every time one of us loads a new video up to this site. Again, thank you so much. I hope you will give these cards a try because they're an awful lot of fun, and I have loaded another video here for you. I hope you enjoy it.